Welcome to Force Feedback. I am your host, Jordan Gray, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Blakelyn Bailey and Jaime Alfaro, who are both regional sales managers with ForceMetrics. Blakelyn comes from a background in sales, working with companies in the legal field before switching to public safety. And Jaime, a former 911 dispatcher, brought her frontline experience to ForceMetrics. We're really excited to have them today. Welcome, Blakelyn and Jaime. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. Thank you for having us, Jordan.
Pleasure to be here.
How is your summer going? How are things going in your neck of the woods?
Things are good. Summer's wrapping up. My daughter's about to start high school, so that's a little surreal, but it's been a great summer out here in Washington.
And I would say here in Minnesota, it's been a bit rainy, so we haven't had as much boat time as we would like, but we still have a lot of end of summer activities coming up in September with some bike races and visits with friends. So looking forward to it.
Very nice. Blakelyn, do you have a cabin in Minnesota or do you boat nearby?
We do not have a cabin, but we are fortunate to live on a lake.
Oh,
So
that's nice.
yeah, we can just pop out when we want.
Jealous.
That
All
would be
right, we're
nice.
gonna just jump right into it. All right, so when you're speaking with a prospective agency, how do you frame the specific tangible value that Force Metrics is bringing to the day-to-day operations of our current agencies and what we'll bring to theirs?
Well, one of the biggest challenges that law enforcement faces is the inability to access information quickly. And so, by enabling a single search across multiple systems and layering in safety signals, um, Force Metrics is able to actually tell a story about the people and the places that law enforcement interacts with every day. And I would say, why does it matter? It matters because, depending on your role there, it's going to directly affect the outcomes that you've got. If I'm a responding officer, I can adjust my response in the moment based on whether the person I'm about to interact with poses a threat or if he or she has special needs. Investigators also benefit from using force metrics because not only do we provide them with information, but we like to say there's no dead ends. They can continue to follow the dots or pull on the thread to get to information that's going to help them solve cases faster. And it also helps to build trust for chiefs and command staff with their, community stakeholders, their city and county officials, and even citizens, because they're able to answer questions quickly using our interactive dynamic dashboards to be able to discuss trends and what they're seeing out in the community.
Yeah, I think Blakelyn is spot on with that. Uh, Part of the challenge that public safety has faced, probably the entire time public safety has been a thing, has been how siloed information is. It can really be stuck with a squad or a group if you're talking about patrol versus investigations or even dispatch. So if you look at what goes into the notes of a call for service, it's going to be a very different set of information than what's going to go in the report. Not because it's not directly correlated, but because what's happening in the moment isn't always translated into the report, and we're not always going to get everything on a call that you get in a report. So having that information siloed really challenges future events to be able to connect those dots. And I've seen it between shifts, I've seen it between departments that are neighboring. That lack of information can be fatal. Hopefully, that's not the outcome, but it can be. Uh, like the most costly phrase I've ever heard or said is "if I'd only known." And that's where if I'd only known that this subject was suffering from PTSD and wanted to fight cops or was known to want to commit suicide by cop. Those are things that happen all the time, and that's information that departments are ultimately held accountable to as trials come up and the scrutiny from media, that Monday morning quarterbacking. But finding that information the moment you need it is a tremendous challenge. And that's what I love about ForceMetrics is that you can search a name, an MO, an area, and see that relevant data in milliseconds and have that information when you need it, not after the fact.
Yeah. And what's typically that reaction like when you do introduce force metrics to agencies or people that have never seen anything like that?
There's mixed reaction. For some people, it blows their mind like, oh my gosh, why haven't we always had this? This is what we need. Uh, and others, they're just so used to the way things are that they wonder if they'll actually use it. So there's that whole gambit, and you're going to find that in any department. There's the folks who want all the technology and the tools, and there's the folks that really don't, and everything in between. So there is that full spectrum. But I'd say most of the reaction is, why haven't we had this the entire time?
Sure, sure. How do you, for both of you, how do you get through to those people that might be hesitant to adopt this?
I don't think you can expect it automatically. As Jamie said, you have to expect that some people aren't going to adopt as quickly. And I think really what changes their mind is seeing the success that the early adopters of the solution have. Once they start hearing from their colleagues, I just found the piece of information I've been trying to find for months, or in a few milliseconds, I found exactly what I needed. And they start seeing success that their colleagues are having, and they're much more willing to jump on board. I guess they just, a lot of cops, they don't believe with their eyes. They have to see it to believe it. And it takes it takes seeing the proof to want to adopt. They've got a lot of places and tools to choose from. And I think they tend to sort of self-serve and figure out what the most effective tools are. And they come around to those.
Okay, okay. Um, when you're getting familiar with a new agency and uncovering some of their specific challenges, how do you map to the right solutions for their team? How do you kind of guide them in that direction and show them the solution for their agency?
Of course, it's all about getting to know and understand your customers' challenges and the priorities of the agency. We all ask questions, we ask more questions, we ask follow-up questions for the follow-up questions, and we just try to get the most understanding of how they're doing things currently and how we can improve upon that. But beyond that, you can look for unique sort of sources of information by keeping up just something simple like the news. I'm always watching to see what's happening for different agencies in my territory, and inevitably there's going to be some interaction or situation that perhaps doesn't have a great outcome. And when I see that, I recognize how force metrics could have been helpful to them if they just had the right information at the time going in. Or I might see, for instance, that in order to tackle a rise in a particular type of crime, a task force will be created. Well, I know right away that force metrics would be very useful in helping to deploy that task force effectively to get the best results. And so I can open up a conversation based on something that I've even seen in the news. So those would be the two sort of ways I typically look at things.
I'd agree with Blakelyn. It's about asking questions and understanding what they need. Each department is going to have, some similarities. Almost everyone is understaffed. Organized retail crime, vehicle theft, those are things that are going to hit just about everybody. But really listening to each department and what are their priorities? What are they struggling with? What does their daily workflow look like? Force Metrics is a tool that has something for everyone,
Mhm.
but just talking at someone about what it does, nobody wants to be talked at. And really that's not fun for Blakelyn or I either. Uh, we want to help. We want to get in and really get to know departments and offer tools that are going to help with that. So really understanding the day-to-day, the workflow, and what their needs are is where I think we all like to start.
Absolutely. At least three of the agencies that I've spoken with in the last 90 days are creating different types of task force specifically around juvenile uh, crime on the rise, whether that's carjackings, um, sort of disruptive large gatherings for the car takedowns and things like that, or even gun violence, unfortunately. So I know that using FMStat makes it very easy for command staff not just to see which types of crime are going up or down, but then it enables them to actually dig into the underlying data to see the patterns, the locations where these things are happening, the most involved people. And it's going to allow them to create a very precise approach based on objective data so that they're causing as little disruption to the community while still targeting the areas that need and the people, quite frankly, that need to be targeted. So FM Stat is a great tool for task force that are being assembled. It also gives them the ability to reflect after implementing these practices and putting things into operation and take a look. Are things going up and down? Is what we're doing being effective? And I think when the community sees that they can be effective with as little disruption as possible, it just makes the entire agency look good and makes the agency feel good knowing that they're doing their job the way they want to do their job.
Blakelyn, I think something you said there was really important, and that was the objective data,
Mhm.
because it is so easy for one loud voice in a community to really skew the perception of the police and the work that they're doing, or even the problems that are, in the area. So having that objective data to look at and point to and have something you can actually quantify and say, here's where things were, here's where things are, or let's look at this objectively. It changes the conversation and brings back to what is so important now, that transparency and that openness about here's what's actually happening. And being able to go look at the data, being able to have something solid to go back and speak to the citizens about, whether it's a community briefing, a city council, uh, even just a press release to say, here's what's actually happening. Here's where we can partner with the public and show how effective or ineffective at times programs are. It really lets you make good decisions with your resources. It's working, let's continue. It's not working, let's pivot. And looking at the data, here's an intelligent way to pivot, make the most of those limited resources.
I agree, Jamie. I also think it's important to discuss so many of our agencies now are working with nonprofits or other types of groups within the community to have a more balanced approach to many different types of situations. And I think it's also a way that they can measure how they're deploying and working with those groups as well to have a more holistic approach to making things better.
Yeah, that's really
Absolutely.
interesting. Yeah, that's a great point. Definitely spans further than just the, police department, but public safety as a whole in the community or just, community outreach. Everywhere across the agencies that we work with, there are personnel that are working in high stress situations every single day. And not only how do you communicate the ways in which ForceMetrics is helping these public safety officials work more safely and even more effectively in those high stress situations. But once they start using ForceMetrics, what is some of the most common feedback that you hear about making a difference in the work they do?
I think Jamie and I have both touched on the fact that there, especially during a quickly developing situation, that nothing is more important than having information quickly. So I think it's relevant that force metrics can be used on any device. So officers can get information quickly on the fly and make decisions. Do I need additional help? Or does this person have special needs that's going to require a different response, or I need to approach them differently? Everyone can agree officers aren't going to approach a deaf person that has mental health issues the same way they would a known gang member with a very long history of violence, right? Um, Also, to compound a situation, if you've got you know, a mass incident in particular, it can be extremely chaotic as well as highly stressful. And it's well documented that sometimes this can lead to catastrophic results if agencies are not sharing information or relying on the same information as they make operational decisions. So with the ForceMetrics regional data sharing, it's enabling agencies not only to share information, but to be confident that they're seeing the same information and basing their decisions on consistent information across the board, rather than one agency only knowing part A and another agency having this piece of information over here and reacting differently because they don't have the whole picture. So I think ForceMetrics just helps ensure that response is truly coordinated.
Absolutely. Data sharing is huge. Uh, you've probably heard it said before, the only thing that stops at jurisdictional lines is data,
Yeah.
because criminals don't stop, bullets don't stop, drugs don't stop. It's just data that stops at the jurisdictional line.
Mhm.
So being able to coordinate with agencies by doing a simple search, I mean, that's incredible. I can't tell you how many times I had to call another agency and say, hey, do you have history with this person or this MO or whatever it is? And if they have time to get on the phone with me and talk about it, it still takes minutes to get that information. If I can search a name and pull up and combine 4 or 5, 10 different person records and see, okay, well, these two subjects that I have an officer out talking to have been in several domestics together in different jurisdictions. It changes the conversation. And it changes the safety level, to be honest, because if as a dispatcher I see something like that, I'm going to proactively send some backup and make sure that my responding officer has the tools to de-escalate that situation. Where if they're just going out and doing a welfare check because a citizen called in that a couple was arguing, well, that could be anything. So having that ability to look at something and have that context, it's incredible. And it's going to reduce use of force. It's going to help officers have the information that they need to de-escalate a situation before it goes hands-on, before it becomes a bigger issue.
Yeah. And to your point on regional data sharing, that's been a hot topic in some of my other conversations with the team, and just how outdated that is and how infrequent it seems that cities are sharing data with each other. And
We've all seen the TV shows like CSI and all those, and they're fun TV shows. Don't get me wrong. I love them no matter how inaccurate they are. But we think that everything is as smooth as it looks on TV, and it's just not.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the reality.
Well, the good news is, though, Jordan, more and more when I show force metrics to agencies, one of the first things they say is, we can share data. How many of my neighbors are using force metrics?
Mhm.
This would be fantastic. So the tides are turning, and I'm glad that force metrics is able to help shepherd agencies through that time.
Yeah. How do you help our agencies feel confident in their decision to choose new technology like force metrics? And what are some of the key things or features that make force metrics stand out from your perspective? What do you really drive home to them?
Well, to make them feel confident in their decision, I always say, we are here to help maximize the investments that they've already made. They have been, they spent a lot of money in the systems that they currently have. We just help everything work so much more efficiently and effectively and faster. We layer on top so they can feel good that we're helping to maximize existing investments. But beyond that, I think it just goes to feeling, when it comes to feeling confident in a decision, I always tell them to go talk to our customers and not with me around, have candid conversations, reach out to these people and ask them what's their experience been with us, not just with the product. And of course, customers love to share their success stories, so that they will naturally do that and tell them how Force Metrics has helped them in different situations, which I love, but also just their experience with us as a company, whether it's us in sales or, our implementation team or our engineers, or our customer success. team that helps them, after go live and make sure that they maximize their investment in ForceMetrics and that they're leveraging every possible thing they can out of the solution.
Definitely. And I think our ease of use is
Mm.
is a huge asset. Like if you can do a Google search, if you can use Zillow, you can use Force Metrics. And I think that really speaks to our value. And that's why in the agencies that we're in, we've got between, I think it's 50 and 80% usage
Mhm.
that people are actually getting in and using the tool. That's huge. I've never seen a tech product other than maybe, the email system you use get that consistent of usage. And it's because there's something for everyone and it's incredibly easy.
It's a huge, Jamie is absolutely hitting the nail on the head with that. If it's not easy to use, they will not use it. So,
Fair, very fair. They've got the systems that they're used to, and bringing in a new system might not always sound exciting. And I'm sure you face a lot of people reluctant to try it. And all right, we've got one wrap-up question. Once an agency adopts Force Metrics, how do you continue to demonstrate the value and your commitment to making their jobs easier throughout over time, throughout new feature upgrades or new product launches?
well, I think it's important that we do listen to our customers. Right within the application, we give them a way to provide feedback to us as a company that the whole company sees. And, it's often the best ideas about how to improve the product come from existing customers. So I think as they see us start to add in, as we release, as we update and evolve the software and the platform, they start to see features that they asked for or wished for being deployed for everyone. And they recognize that we're doing this in a thoughtful manner with an eye to things that make the biggest impact to how they're handling their daily duties. And I can't even take much credit, for this part, but our customer success team is constantly making sure, doing touch points with them to make sure they recognize that there are new things for them to use or rely on, and making sure they're trained properly or that the new folks coming into the agency are getting training. And I think these things just we have to show a pattern proving that we want to be their long-term business partner and that we're committed to their success. And I think it's these are some of the ways that we can do that.
Hmm.
I completely agree with Blakelyn. The way that Force Metrics listens to customers is is absolutely incredible. Like taking the feedback from customers and making the product better. And the enhancements that we're doing to the platform aren't something that we're going back and saying, well, okay, now you have to pay more. We're using that input to increase the value without increasing the cost. And we're really truly partnering with agencies to make their jobs easier, to make their communities safer. And I think that partnership is something really special that ForceMetrics offers because we are a lot of people that are from and adjacent to the public safety community. So that care goes well beyond business practices to genuinely caring about the communities, the responders, the people that we're working with to make sure that they have the best possible tool to do their job safely.
Absolutely. Yeah. That the customer feedback process is definitely unlike anything I've seen. And I was talking with the CS team and uh sharing that everyone can see this feedback, and it's not just going to one team or to a few people. It's getting out there to everyone so everyone can be in the know and everyone can help make these things happen and make these changes happen and make sure our agencies are heard. So,
So I was talking with a former detective actually that was telling me when they were in the department using Force Metrics, they had a subject they were looking for, a rather dangerous subject. And really the most consistent piece of information they had about this person was the vehicle that they drove, not a license plate, unfortunately, but just white Ford Explorer. Well, no matter how good your ALPR system is or other things, that's going to give you a lot of data to comb through if you're just looking for a white Ford SUV or anything of that nature. But by typing into ForceMetrics white Ford Explorer, they were able to really condense what they were looking at and pull a subject description. They were able to get a plate on the vehicle, subject name, and some really good information that led to contacting and eventually apprehending the suspect. This was information that came together in minutes. So, in less than an hour, this investigator had information that they had been trying to search for who knows how long, and by their admission, wouldn't have found if it wasn't easy to just type in that one consistent piece of information and look across platforms and see what the data said and find that suspect. And the suspect wasn't the RO, which is pretty common, the registered owner. I think ForceMetrics connecting those dots is one of the largest values that we bring. The dots are out there, but as we mentioned earlier, they're siloed. And putting those pieces together, especially when it's across jurisdictional lines, it's time consuming, it's a challenge, and most departments just don't have resources to chase down everything that has to be manually chased down. Bringing it together with some data aggregation is an absolutely groundbreaking tool that's solving cases and protecting the public and our responders.
It's a no-brainer. Everyone needs that.
Absolutely.
And I was the school resource officer at one of our agencies. He's got, some kids that he knows unfortunately can act up in school, and he recognizes it's because they do not have good home lives. So the officer started tracking in ForceMetrics, just watching for the name, that either the child's name or the parent names or the location where the child lived popping up in ForceMetrics. And sure enough, after one evening, he gets an alert and he sees that there was a domestic disturbance at this child's home. He was able to read the report and decided the best way to support that child the next day was to have breakfast waiting for him because he just had a very stressful night. He may not have gotten any sleep, and it was highly likely that he hadn't eaten. And so just by giving that kid lunch or breakfast and sitting down with him, it completely changed the dynamic that officer had with that child, and just greatly improved things across the board to support that child in a way that I hadn't heard of before. So I just think that's a fantastic story.
That is a fantastic story. Blakelyn, Jaime, thank you for joining me today and sharing your insights. As always, I appreciate your time, and we appreciate your dedication to making a difference here in public safety and with ForceMetrics. So thank you.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thanks for having us.